Welcome back to The Explainer. So let's just dive right into a topic that honestly perfectly blends everyday sensory pleasure with some incredibly rigid, highly specific molecular physics. We're talking about the molecular science and physics of chocolate tempering. Now, if you've ever picked up a premium store-bought chocolate bar, you know exactly the experience I'm talking about, right? You unwrap it, and there's this beautiful, almost mirror-like gloss right on the surface. And then, when you break a piece off, snap. There's that loud, clean, undeniably satisfying snap right next to your ear. Well, that sensory experience? It's not an accident. No way. It is the result of highly controlled molecular engineering. And today, we're going to unpack exactly how that whole shebang works.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You take that exact same beautiful premium chocolate, you bring it home, you melt it down, maybe to dip some strawberries or make a coating, and then you let it cool. But what actually happens? Instead of getting that gorgeous, glossy finish back, you get something completely different. It's soft. It's got this dull, honestly kind of sad finish. You might even see these weird white streaks running through it. And the absolute worst part? It instantly melts into a crumbly mess the second you touch it. So why does the exact same ingredient behave completely differently after simply being melted and cooled? Well, the answer lies in the absolutely non-negotiable science of tempering.
Section 1. Cocoa butter polymorphism, the microscopic culprit. Let's get into it.
To figure out why our home melted chocolate fails so miserably, we've got to look past the kitchen counter and go deep under the microscope. Because to truly master chocolate, or, even just to understand it, we really have to understand its core component, which is cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is the fat inside the chocolate, and it's the single element controlling the behavior, the texture, and the shine of the final product. And that brings us to the most important word of this entire explainer, polymorphism. Polymorphism is simply the unique ability of a fat to crystallize into multiple different microscopic shapes and structures, depending entirely on exactly how it is cooled. So, what does this actually mean for our chocolate? Well, when chocolate is in a hot, liquid state, its fat molecules are basically running wild. They are moving completely at random. But as the temperature drops and the chocolate cools down, those molecules have to lock together to form solid crystal structures. It's kind of like bricks trying to form a wall. But here's the catch. Because cocoa butter is polymorphic, those bricks don't just stack in one single way.
Moving on to Section 2, the crystal hierarchy, breaking down forms I through VI.
So because cocoa butter has this crazy polymorphic superpower, as it cools, it can actually arrange itself into 6 distinctly different types of crystals. Scientifically, we classify these as form I through form V6, though you might sometimes hear folks call them alpha, beta, and gamma crystals. Let's walk through what happens when we don't control the temperature perfectly. Say you shock your melted chocolate by chilling it way too fast, like throwing it straight into the freezer to set. Well, you're going to create form I and form 2 crystals. If you look at the chart, these melt at just 17 and 21 degrees Celsius. They are highly unstable. The chocolate stays super soft and just crumbles instantly when you try to pick it up. Now, what if you just leave the melted chocolate out on the counter to cool naturally at totally uncontrolled room temperature? That's when you get form 3 and form 4. Sure, the chocolate might look somewhat firm, but it lacks any real gloss, it's got a terrible snap, and with melting points of 26 and 28 degrees, it just melts far too easily. Honestly, this right here, this explains the frustrating, dull, crumbly mess you get when you simply melt and cool chocolate at home. You are randomly creating those weak form I through form 4 crystals.
So the crucial point we really need to focus on is this exact number right here, 32 degrees Celsius. Out of all 6 possibilities, we are chasing only one, form V, which is also known as beta crystals. Form 5 is the absolute holy grail. It is the only crystal structure that aligns perfectly, like a tight, beautifully built brick wall, giving the chocolate that radiant, mirror-like shine and that sharp, loud snap. But here is the most fascinating part about Form 5. It has a melting point of exactly 34 degrees Celsius. Why does that matter? Well, think about it. Human body temperature is roughly 37 degrees Celsius. So Form 5 creates this tightly bound molecular matrix that sits perfectly stable and solid on a room temperature table. But the absolute second it touches your 37-degree tongue, it melts, beautifully and instantly.
And then there is Form 6. This is basically the stubborn villain of the chocolate world. It has a higher melting point of 36 degrees, but it's an imposter. See, it doesn't form during our standard cooling process. Rather, it develops over months and months of storage, creating this extremely hard, waxy, and entirely unpalatable texture.
No one wants that. So, knowing all of this, what actually is tempering? Well, tempering isn't just melting chocolate. Tempering is the highly deliberate, scientific process of destroying those 5 unwanted crystal structures so that only our holy grail, form V, can dominate and multiply.
Which brings us to Section 3, Phase 1, the complete melt. This is the very first, entirely non-negotiable step of the tempering process in the kitchen. We have to create a blank canvas. You see, no matter what type of chocolate you buy, whether it's dark, milk, or white, it already contains existing, completely uncontrolled crystal patterns from its past storage and transportation. So we can't just melt the chocolate a little bit and pour it. We have to completely wipe the slate clean, literally erase the chaotic molecular history already present inside the fat structure. Every single existing crystal has to be completely destroyed before we can build our new, perfect matrix.
To actually achieve this blank canvas, we have to hit a very precise thermal zone. We must heat the chocolate to between 45 degrees and 50 degrees Celsius. Usually, you do this carefully over a double boiler, maybe shooting it with a digital laser thermometer to ensure total accuracy. Because at this precise, elevated thermal zone, every single crystal form, from I all the way through V, completely liquefies. The molecular bonds break apart, and the cocoa butter fat molecules return to their completely random, freely moving liquid state.
But you definitely have to be careful here because there are strict practical boundaries you absolutely must respect. Not all chocolate can handle the exact same heat. If you're working with a premium dark couverture chocolate, pushing it all the way up to 50 degrees Celsius is perfectly safe. However, if you're working with milk chocolate or white chocolate, you must never exceed 45 degrees Celsius. The critical point to take away here is the risk factor. Milk and white chocolates contain highly delicate milk solids. If you cross that strict 45-degree threshold, you will literally burn those milk solids, completely and permanently ruining the flavor and texture of your entire batch. But as long as you respect these limits, you'll be left with a perfectly uniform, completely liquid, blank canvas.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty massive question, right? We've successfully melted our chocolate safely. We have an incredibly smooth, perfectly liquid bowl entirely devoid of crystals. But what happens next? How do we manipulate this chaotic liquid blank canvas to form pure, stable form V crystals? To what exact temperature must we drop it to ensure forms I through IB are destroyed while form V survives? And maybe more importantly, how can you execute this flawlessly right in your own kitchen without relying on multi-million-dollar factory machinery? Well, it's a fascinating puzzle of thermodynamics, and it's exactly what makes the science of pastries so incredible. So thanks for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep asking questions about the science behind what you eat.
Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Okay, today we are stepping into a true masterclass. Look, if you've ever tried melting chocolate at home and ended up with a dull, streaky, or, just a crumbly mess, I promise you, you're not alone. Tempering chocolate is often viewed as this incredibly intimidating, almost magical culinary art that's strictly reserved for high-end pastry chefs. But today, we're completely stripping away that mystery. We're diving into the culinary science of chocolate tempering. We're not just cooking today, we are literally manipulating chemistry. We're going to unlock the exact thermodynamic engineering you need to elevate your home pastry skills to a truly professional standard.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our structured roadmap to mastery today covers 4 steps. First, the goal, form V crystals. Second, the 5 global methods. Third, the critical temperature matrix. And finally, testing and troubleshooting.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the goal, form V crystals.
Before we go any further, you really have to completely shift your mindset. When we temper chocolate, we aren't just, melting and cooling an ingredient. That's actually a massive misconception. We are acting as thermodynamic engineers. We are physically manipulating the microscopic molecular structure of cocoa butter to force it into a very specific state, form V crystals. In the chaotic, microscopic world of cocoa butter molecules, there are actually several different types of crystals that form as the liquid cools down, and most of them completely unstable. They make the chocolate crumbly, it melts instantly in your hands, just a mess. But form V? Well, form V is the holy grail of pastry science. It's this highly stable molecular structure that gives professionally tempered chocolate its signature sharp snap, that beautiful glossy mirror finish, and it totally prevents the cocoa fats from separating out. So every single technique, every tiny temperature shift we're about to discuss, it all has one single ultimate scientific goal, forcing the generation of these dominant form V crystals.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 5 global methods.
Now, amateurs often think there's only one way to temper chocolate, usually whatever single method they saw on some cooking competition show. But professional food science is incredibly adaptable. Depending on your environment, your available equipment, or just the sheer scale of production, pastry chefs utilize 5 distinct internationally recognized methods to hit our Form V goal: tabling, seeding, ice bath, microwave, and direct or incubator. Let's break these down one by one.
First up, method 1, the tabling method. This is that traditional, time-honored artisanal art you've probably seen chocolatiers doing in high-end shop windows. You take your completely melted, glossy, hot chocolate, and you pour exactly 2/3 of it directly onto a cold, thick white marble or granite slab. And because stone absorbs heat incredibly fast, you have to work rapidly. You use a professional triangle scraper and a long palette knife to aggressively move the chocolate back and forth, back and forth. You're literally shocking the liquid with the cold stone and the physical friction, creating a massive wave of Form V crystals. The exact second it thickens and begins to paste, boom, it's immediately scraped back into the bowl with the remaining 1/3 of hot chocolate, balancing the temperature out perfectly. And this brilliantly illustrates our second method, seeding. This is actually the industry standard in most modern professional kitchens just because it is so incredibly efficient. As Chef Devu notes, solid crystals act as a structural blueprint, forcing the surrounding liquid molecules to copy their perfect Form V alignment. So in this method, instead of cooling the chocolate on a slab, we drop about 25% of solid, shiny, pre-tempered chocolate collets or chips directly into our hot, melted chocolate. As you whisk them rapidly, those solid pieces don't just melt away. They act as a literal seed. They introduce perfect Form V crystals into the chaotic liquid, forcing all those other free-floating molecules to align and copy their perfect structural blueprint. It's brilliant. Now, if you don't have a massive marble slab in your kitchen and you don't have pre-tempered seed chocolate lying around, method 3 is your absolute savior, the ice bath method. Here, you float your bowl of warm chocolate over a larger bowl of ice cubes and cold water. But hear me clearly on this. The absolute key here is continuous agitation. You cannot stop stirring for a single second. If you do, unstable Form I and II crystals will instantly seize right around the cold edges of the bowl. And the stakes are incredibly high here. You have to avoid even a single drop of water entering your chocolate bowl. Water and chocolate are absolute mortal enemies. If water gets in, your chocolate instantly undergoes phase separation and is completely, utterly ruined.
Next up is method 4, the microwave method. So this is the modern quick fix. It's perfect for very fast, small batches, but it does require serious caution. You absolutely must use a plastic bowl, never ever glass, because glass retains way too much heat. You microwave solid, pre-tempered chocolate in brief, 15-second bursts, and you stir aggressively after every single burst. Now here's the vital secret to this method. You aren't actually melting the chocolate completely. You're merely softening the existing Form V crystals into a workable state, bringing it to exactly 31 to 32 degrees Celsius. If you slip up and accidentally cross 34 degrees, the temper is completely lost, the crystals are destroyed, and the whole method fails.
Finally, we have method 5, the direct or incubator method. This is how large-scale industrial facilities and advanced culinary labs automate the chemistry entirely. The chocolate gets loaded into these wildly expensive high-tech digital tempering machines or temperature-controlled incubators. High-end thermodynamic sensors manipulate the temperature down to exact decimal points, melting, cooling, and maintaining the working temperature perfectly. It requires absolutely zero manual labor, taking all human error completely out of the equation.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 3, the critical temperature matrix.
We've talked extensively about the physical tools and the 5 methods, right? But none of those matter if you don't understand the strict chemical rules that dictate exactly how those tools are used. Take a mental screenshot of this matrix, guys. This is the core physics of the entire process, the ultimate rulebook for your pastry lab. And this is exactly where most pastry cooks fail, by treating every type of chocolate identically. Listen to the numbers here. Dark chocolate needs to be melted to 50 degrees, cooled down to 27, and gently reheated to work at 31 to 32. Milk chocolate, melted only to 45, cooled lower to 26, and worked at 29 to 30. And white chocolate, melted safely at 45, cooled all the way down to 25, and worked at a highly strict 28 to 29 degrees. Now you might be wondering, why are these thermal zones so entirely unique? Well, it all comes down to their distinct chemical profiles. Dark chocolate is the stable standard. It consists purely of cocoa mass, cocoa butter, and sugar. Because it has absolutely zero dairy interference, it's highly resilient to heat. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum is white chocolate. It is incredibly delicate. Technically speaking, white chocolate lacks any cocoa mass whatsoever. It's entirely composed of cocoa butter, sugar, and high concentrations of milk powder. Because of this heavy dairy presence and all those milk proteins, it is incredibly prone to catching and scorching. So the crucial point is 29 degrees Celsius. Because white chocolate's fat structure is the least stable, 29 degrees is its absolute maximum limit. Think about milk chocolate too. It has a working threshold a full 2 degrees lower than dark chocolate. If you heat milk or white chocolate to dark chocolate working specs, the milk fats will naturally disrupt the crystal matrix and the whole thing will completely break down. With white chocolate especially, you do not have a single degree of error. Absolute precision is mandatory.
All right, moving into section 4, testing and troubleshooting.
Now, let's shift to a more practical mindset. We have our crystals forming, we followed the matrix perfectly, but how do we definitively know it actually worked? Well, before you ever pour your chocolate into expensive silicone or polycarbonate molds, you have to verify the chemical structure. Executing a tempering test is a straightforward 3-step scientific process. First, you just dip the tip of a clean metal palette knife or spatula right into your working batch of chocolate. Second, set it down and leave it at a controlled room temperature of about 20 degrees Celsius for 3 to 5 minutes. Third, observe the results. If the chocolate sets firmly, pulls inward just slightly, develops a refined semi-matte sheen, and is completely non-sticky to the touch, congratulations, your batch is perfectly tempered and ready for professional use.
But what if the test fails? What if you're staring down the ultimate enemy of the pastry lamp, fat bloom? If your test strip remains tacky, or if it dries but has these dull, white, powdery streaks across it, you are looking at fat bloom. It simply means that somewhere during the process, the fat separated. The crystal lattice we were trying so hard to build completely failed to lock together. The Form V crystals just didn't take hold.
Now, if you see fat bloom, take a deep breath. Here is the fix. Do not panic. Your chocolate isn't wasted. You haven't ruined your expensive ingredients. You actually have the scientific power to literally reset the chocolate's crystal memory. All you have to do is reheat that exact same batch back up to 50 degrees Celsius for dark chocolate or 45 for your dairy-based chocolates. This completely destroys the failed crystal structure. Then, you simply rerun your chosen physical method and follow your temperature matrix again with exact precision. You can reset and try again as many times as you need.
And there you have it, the complete thermodynamic engineering behind tempering chocolate across all 5 global methods. It might feel incredibly intimidating at first, but honestly, once you master these exact thermal thresholds, you control the medium entirely. Whether you're crafting smooth mousses or glossy pralines, your work will instantly match international luxury standards. So I leave you with this final provocative thought. Which tempering method will you master first in your own kitchen? Will you tackle the traditional, rapid-fire art of tabling on cold marble, or will you embrace the highly efficient, industry-standard seating method? The choice is totally yours. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Grab your thermometer, hit the kitchen, and I will see you next time.